all I did was write out that thing on her stomach, then I hit her about 10 or...
It's been a while. Before we start this video, I wanted to apologize for the late content that's been coming out. I've been dealing with a lot of multimedia channels and a sudden vacation, some issues involving extortion, thanks to the YouTube copyright system. And while it's no excuse, I'm doing my best to stick to the original schedule I had planned. So thank you for bearing with me. That being said, this case is going to be one of the most gruesome I've ever had to cover on this channel. If you do not wish to hear about the topics of abuse, rape, and torture, please click off this video. I will understand, as the harsh realities of Sylvia Likens' story are a little hard to stomach. That being said, while I was researching, I actually had to take a few minute breaks myself during this video, and I wouldn't blame you if you didn't want to hear about it. Let me lead you to the dark tonight to witness what one investigator of the Indianapolis Police Department called the most sadistic case ever investigated in 35 years. Sylvia Likens was born to Lester Cecil Likens and Elizabeth Betty Francis on January 3rd, 1949. In between two sets of fraternal twins, she was the third child in the family of carnival workers that traveled the country as vendors. She was described as an optimistic and sweet girl with a missing front tooth due to a childhood collision with her brother. Friends and family even called her Cookie. She loved to roller skate with her siblings, and she was a big fan of the Beatles. One of the things she was also known for was the way that she protected her timid younger sister Jenny, who had been diagnosed with polio at a young age. She had a limp leg and required a brace to walk, but that didn't stop Sylvia from including her on everything. She even fastened a roller skate to Jenny's strong leg and held her so they could skate together at the local roller rink. Sylvia also worked from home as a teenager, as a babysitter, and would always give her parents part of her earnings since they were traveling on the road with the sons of the family. Sylvia and Jenny were always staying with a relative or a family friend while their parents would travel the country as vendors, citing their daughter's education and safety as the primary concern. This would be the first issue that would send heartbreaking events into motion. On July 3rd of 1965, the Liken family were informed that their mother Elizabeth had been arrested and jailed for shoplifting. Their father Cecil made the decision to send Sylvia and Jenny to board with their friend's family. Gertrude Baniszewski and her family took the Liken daughters under the promise of $20 a week in exchange for care and housing for them. For the first few weeks, it seemed to be a great fit for them. Everything worked out well as they did chores and went to Sunday school regularly with their friends and now new roommates. Although it's never long until paradise fades. Cecil Likens began making payments later to Gertrude, and it frustrated her. She began to take it out on his daughters, beating their behinds with a wooden paddle as much as 15 times after Paula Baniszewski had accused them of overeating at a church supper. It became worse and worse as Sylvia was singled out. She was denied sufficient amounts of food, having to eat leftovers or garbage scraps. She began being beaten by Gertrude and her daughter Paula after talking about a boyfriend she had in California over the summer, while Gertrude stated that anything you do with a boy will be sure to give you a baby. They began pointing out her weight and wouldn't even let her sit on a chair, instead beating her for trying. This was all happening while Paula was 3 months pregnant as well. She was even force-fed food and forced to eat her vomit after throwing it up by the family and a neighborhood boy. Hating the abuse she suffered at home, Sylvia began spreading rumors about her former friend Stephanie Baniszewski, and especially about Paula, calling them prostitutes at school. Stephanie fought with her and made up, but her boyfriend Coy Hubbard brutally beat Sylvia over the rumors. After finding out what happened at home, Gertrude assaulted her with a paddle while Paula actually broke her own wrist, assaulting Sylvia's face and teeth. Any child that came to the Baniszewski residence would actually assault Sylvia. It was a pretty common thing that was reported. It was reported that she was burned over 100 times with cigarettes, and fighting maneuvers were practiced on her like some kind of crash test dummy. She was sexually assaulted as well multiple times, being kicked in the genitals, and was even forced to insert an empty Coke bottle into her genitals. Sylvia was banned from school by Gertrude after stealing a gym uniform as a means of getting new clothes, seeing as she wouldn't buy them for her, and Stephanie rallied to her defense, but it did nothing to stop the beating that she had received. The torture was so bad that the Likens sisters had endured that it was to the point where they were scared to admit anything to their family. Their parents, who had visited them for the last time in August of that year, had not noticed anything distressed about them. In reality, they were too scared, as Gertrude and the rest of the family were there watching them, waiting to see what they would say. They even taunted them when they left. On another day, Marie Baniszewski and Sylvia even found Sylvia's eldest sibling, Diana Shoemaker, in a park one day. Sylvia admitted the abuse, but her sister thought it was an exaggeration. Of course, Marie relayed this information back to the Baniszewski family as a whole, who proceeded to discipline her by scalding her with a hot bath and beating her when she passed out to, quote-unquote, revive her. 3 other times were Jenny and Sylvia seen by people in danger, but nothing was done about it. A school nurse visited the Baniszewskis after a neighbor boy reported seeing Sylvia with open wounds. She left unsuspiciously after Gertrude explained that she'd attempted to run away and didn't actually know where she was at the moment. The second time was by the neighbor couple, Raymond and Phyllis Vermillion, who saw Sylvia being assaulted by Paula. She had black eyes, but they never reported anything to the authorities. The third and final time was when Diana Shoemaker attempted to contact her sisters at the Baniszewski's residence. She was denied entry by Gertrude, stating that the parents said that she wasn't allowed to see them anymore, and when Diana ran into Jenny by chance nearby the house, Jenny told her that she couldn't tell anyone what was going on, or she would be in trouble. Towards October, it became increasingly worse. Sylvia had words carved into her by Gertrude, and by one of the neighbor children. She was cut, then put into baths of water and salt. They used a hot anchor bolt to brand her with the letter S, but it somehow actually came out as a 3. She was beaten for that too, by having words carved into her body with a hot needle. Each day, she barely clung to life as she was made practically into an attraction for the neighborhood children, and kids actually paid money to assault her. She was a human torture attraction. After the night of the carving, Sylvia confided in her sister Jenny, stating,
Jenny, I know you don't want me to, but I'm going to die. I can tell it.
The following day, Gertrude had Sylvia write a letter trying to frame her abuse and sexual torment, even her death, on some anonymous group of neighborhood boys. She wanted Sylvia to frame it to her parents that the Baniszewskis had nothing to do with Sylvia's future death, and Gertrude had planned to have Sylvia left out in the woods. They were going to tie her up naked, strip her, and leave her in the woods by herself. That night, Sylvia was offered crackers, and when she refused, she was force-fed them in response. The next 2 days are when the worst happens. After hearing about the plan, Sylvia attempted an escape. She was emaciated, malnourished, and dehydrated. She of course didn't get far until Gertrude brought her back inside, and she was force-fed toast and then beaten multiple times with a curtain rod by Gertrude and Coy Hubbard. Sylvia was rendered unconscious and dragged back to the basement. It was that night that a neighborhood screaming from the basement of Gertrude's house, but as 3 a.m. approached, it stopped. They decided to never report it to the police since it had stopped. October 26th. Sylvia Likens' final day on Earth was heartbreaking, to say the least. She was dragged to the kitchen and propped up against the wall where she was fed a donut and milk. She couldn't eat or drink either of them, and she was thrown to the floor in frustration and dragged back downstairs. Jenny saw her one last time trying to help her sister. She became delirious, barely remembering who anyone was and only being able to recite up to the letter D after being told to do her ABCs. Jenny went to do chores for the neighbors, hoping to earn some money, and left Sylvia alone with John Baniszewski Jr. in the basement. He sprayed her down with a hose and attempted to clean her, quote-unquote. But she attempted an escape again. She climbed the stairs to see Gertrude one last time, before Gertrude stomped on her head. And then she just stared at Sylvia. Sylvia had stopped breathing. There was silence. Stephanie had decided to give her a warm soapy bath, not knowing that her former friend had actually died in the basement just minutes earlier. Gertrude labeled her a faker, striking her to get a rise out of her, and when that didn't work, Gertrude finally ordered the neighbor boy, Richard Hobbs, to call the police from a payphone. At approximately 6:30 p.m., Gertrude led the police to the emaciated body of Sylvia Likens, where she handed them the letter that she had forced Sylvia to write. She claimed that a group of boys had beaten her, raped her, and that Sylvia had actually escaped back home where Gertrude had been trying to treat her wounds. Paula Baniszewski told Jenny Likens that her sister was meant to die, and that she would be welcomed as one of the Baniszewski family, while clutching a Bible to her chest. Jenny went along with the story, but told police secretly to get her out of the house for the true confession. Gertrude, Paula, John Jr., Stephanie, Richard Hobbs, and Coy Hubbard were all arrested under suspicion within hours of the body being discovered. Gertrude admitted to knowing the abuse was taking place and had forced Sylvia down into the basement, stating that she had problems with her urinating at night. Paula signed a confession stating that she abused Sylvia, and 5 other neighborhood children were arrested for being involved with the case. They were released back to their parents under subpoena to testify as witnesses for the case. Sylvia's autopsy revealed she had been killed with a blow to the right temple, and she had over 150 separate wounds across her body. Much to the dismay of Gertrude, she was not found to be pregnant like she had supposedly claimed. Gertrude, Paula, John Jr., Coy Hubbard, and Richard Hobbs were all indicted on first-degree murder. Stephanie Baniszewski was released from custody via habeas corpus bond, but she agreed to testify against her family after waiving her immunity from any impending prosecution. It took only 8 hours to decide the verdict of everybody after trial. Gertrude was found guilty of first-degree murder with a life sentence recommended. Paula was found guilty of second-degree murder. John Jr., Coy Hubbard, and Richard Hobbs were all found guilty of manslaughter. Paula and Gertrude were sentenced to life imprisonment, while John Jr., Hubbard, and Hobbs were sentenced to 2 to 21 years in prison. Due to errors and claims of an unfair trial due to media coverage, Paula and Gertrude were retried in 1971. This time, Paula was charged with voluntary manslaughter, which carried a sentence of 2 to 21 years. Gertrude, however, was still under the life imprisonment sentence due to her first-degree murder charge not changing. Despite having attempted to escape twice unsuccessfully, Paula was released in 1972 from prison. Gertrude was released about 14 years later in 1985 for being a model prisoner. John Jr., Hobbs, and Hubbard all served less than 2 years apiece for their part in the murder and were released. Paula went on to have a child which was put up for adoption. She was recently in the news after her new identity was discovered and she was fired from working in a special aid role in an Iowa school district. Gertrude died of age 61 of lung cancer. She changed her identity and moved to Iowa as well. Her younger children had their identities changed and were put up for adoption. She became a born-again Christian and really embraced the new identity before leaving prison. Richard Hobbs died of lung cancer at age 21, 4 years after his release. Coy Hubbard never changed his name after release, strangely. He was charged with 2 more murders, but the cases never went to trial. After finding work, he was fired from his job after the debut of a film about Sylvia's death called An American Crime was released on TV. He died at age 56 from a heart attack in 2007. John Baniszewski Jr. changed his name and became a lay minister. He admits that his co-defendants and him should have received harsher punishments before passing away at age 52 due to diabetes. Stephanie Baniszewski never received charges, even though they were trying to materialize a case against her. She received a new name and currently works as a school teacher in Florida. Luckily, Jenny Likens eventually went on to live a normal life. She got married and had 2 children before her death in 2004. She stated all those years leading up to her death that no one should blame the parents of her and Sylvia. They trusted Gertrude to take care of them while they were working, and that wasn't the fault of the parents. It was Gertrude's responsibility for what happened to them as a result. No innocent human being alive should ever have to endure the pain that Sylvia Likens endured. She was a 16-year-old girl who never got to materialize the life that she could have had, courtesy of an angry, hateful, and vile woman. Sylvia never got to be the woman she wanted to be, and in a case of poor justice that baffles me to this day, it feels truly like justice was never served properly to the Baniszewski family. I just hope that wherever Sylvia may be, she is resting easy and finally receiving the love and care that she deserved all of her life. She was a protector, a sister, and a daughter. Thank you for watching this video and joining me in the dark tonight. Remember that you are loved, and have a good night.